It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Sunday morning in Illinois is in the Sweet 16. Second time in 3 years. And I wanted to start with this. Seventh time in my life. I'm going to be 40 in October. So that is less than 20% of my existence has featured Illini basketball seasons that get this far. The reason I bring that up is any listener or viewer knows the last month and a half, I have been very critical of aspects of Brad Underwood. But I think it is well worth starting this podcast by saying making the Sweet 16 is something I don't take for granted. And in the historical context of Illinois basketball, that is, in and of itself, a successful season. Now, do we wish for greater success? Yes. Do certain teams, based on their rosters and the talent, maybe deserve higher expectations than that? 100%. And this is a team that is capable, and we saw this back in January into early February, capable of going further 100%. So it's not that I am resting on my laurels and saying, I take everything back. They made the Sweet 16, therefore everything is hunky-dory. But it's a big deal. It is a big deal, and it's worth celebrating. And I celebrated last night by myself. Like, we had the group of friends that we normally watch it with. One was at a function down in Effingham, so he had to watch it from the hotel lobby. Another one, his kids, because of the tip time, are like, Daddy, let's watch. And how can you say no? Because that is something that I know for some of the viewers out there that might have kids. I got a niece yesterday who turned 13, and she has seen 2 of the last 3 years this program make Sweet 16s. I was too young to remember 89. I would have been 14 when they made their first second weekend that I could remember. 14. She's 13. She's seen 2 in the last 3 years. I only bring that up because this is a good basketball program historically. It does wear the badge of honor, or of maybe if not badge, the sort of weight of being the program with the most wins to never win a national title, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So March success has been fleeting for Illini fans, and we know all too well disappointments in the very same spot. And this team did not do that. In fact, they did the opposite. They left no doubt. This weekend was impressive not just because they got 2 wins. It was the manner in which they got them, made all the more impressive by the fact that the previous 6 weeks had not looked all that great. And it is amazing what March success can do in washing the stink off of anything that came before it. I mentioned in the last podcast how so many of my experiences as an Illini fan, like the deep runs in 05 and the Elite 8 and 01, like these were predestined. These were 1 seeds. We knew all year long. And I said on Friday's podcast, why not? Why not be the surprise 3 seed, the team that maybe we didn't expect to make that deep run, to finally be the one to do that? And the way they're playing, regardless of opponent, should leave you encouraged that whatever sort of mojo this team had back in mid-January into February 1st in Nebraska, that month or so, maybe they've conjured it back at the time that it matters the most. Now, we'll talk about Houston, in Houston. Yeah, we'll get into all that. But I did just want to start with the historical context of this, because it's something that, you know, my wife came out as the game was well in hand. There's like 4 minutes to go. And she's like, I thought it'd be safe to come out here now, because I was in the garage. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, yeah, no, it's good. And she was like, how's it feel? I was like, it feels great. It feels great. And what I had personally lost in the last month and a half, and this is on me, was an ability to see, to take a step back, I should say, and see things outside of just a string of tough losses, and recognize that, no, this team was still capable of making that run. And it's been confounding for me, because I had lost a bit of that joy in watching my favorite basketball team play some pretty damn good basketball. I had allowed the culmination of these losses to really sour me on how I was feeling going into the tournament. And for anyone that would accuse me of being negative, well, you'd be correct. I was, and I could not stave that off. I just couldn't. So what this weekend did against, lesser than opponents, against Penn and VCU, what this weekend did for me was remind me, hey, enjoy watching good basketball players play basketball for your university, for the team that you've rooted for your entire life. Simplistic as that sounds, and maybe corny as it sounds, that's what I was able to experience for 4 hours, 2 on Thursday, 2 on Saturday, and just enjoy it. Now, there were moments, it got tied, and then VCU took a brief lead, and you're thinking, oh God, please don't be one of those kind of things, but that was fleeting. I mean, this thing was pretty well in hand from the jump on Thursday, and to me, it was a business trip that was a smashing success. And yeah, the stiffer competition awaits. It is a major step up, and we all know that. But with this team, I've thought, since really January, where they started kicking things into high gear, that it was about this team more so than it was their opponents. That if this team does what they're capable of, it doesn't really matter who's on the other side. And I hope that turns out to be the case Thursday, and then hopefully into Saturday. But it turned out to be the case in Greenville, South Carolina. And them getting away, them going on a road trip, a business trip, away from St. Louis, away from a huge swath of Illini fans, which that's great, but I don't think is necessarily conducive to this team. And now to continue that business trip into another hostile environment in which this team has done pretty well this year, I think it bodes well. It was the ultimate palate cleanser. It was a reset button. You're in the Sweet 16. You deserve to be in the Sweet 16, and you will be the talk of a lot of these different personalities on CBS and TNT and TBS of the team that might be the sneaky pick. And they play like this, I wouldn't disagree. So a lot to get into today. We got the chat thread lighting up. A good Sunday morning to all of you. Sorry for being a little bit late. Laundry, dishes, all these little odd jobs. And I found myself just sort of sitting at the breakfast nook and enjoying my coffee, and just time got away from me. But that was a really fun night, a really fun second half, more to the point, that I think does show, hey, when this thing's clicking, who knows? Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits, my favorite restaurant in Champaign, and just went there last weekend. And that was after the Wisconsin loss. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was chicken soup for the soul. They don't serve chicken soup there, though they have a great selection of soups of the day as you go through their menu. But for me, it's always bone-in steak, medium, steak fries, family-style side, which are just crisp perfectly every time. And then some sort of green thing like asparagus, green beans. But they have family-style sides that you can choose. If you're in more of a comfort food kind of mindset, mac and cheese, phenomenal. But you must wash it down with an old-fashioned. Or my wife will get a martini sometimes. And a great mixologist there at the bar. But Hamilton Walkers is my favorite place to eat in Champaign-Urbana. Visit them in downtown Champaign. Tell them Carp sent you. All right. State Farm agent Brian Hansen. Online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Big Illini fan Brian is, so I'm sure he and the family were having a good time watching that last night. What Brian has done for us insurance-wise is just made it very easy. Homeowner, auto, bundle, State Farm prices, but the customer service is really what sets him and his staff apart. That is Brian Hansen, State Farm agent, brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. Join their maintenance program. This includes no overtime or weekend fees, guaranteed same-day service. We got our AC check coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to need it. It's been working great so far. It's been kicking on a few times over the last few days, which, how about this weather? Amazing. Made this weekend all the more special. But Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing has made our 15-year-old system work like what kind of metaphor or what kind of saying am I looking for? Purring like a kitten. How's that? And they just been great to work with, because we've noticed that for this old house, and it is an old house, that it stays cool in the summer and warm in the winters. And I know Dogtown's a big part of that. 217-841-4728. Finally, Owen Builders LLC. For your next home improvement project, check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Free quotes while you're at it. Big old gallery of the myriad of projects that they can work on. That's owenbuildersllc.com. All right, going to take a sip of my coffee as I peruse the chat thread. I'll get to the chat thread here in a bit. First, a few thoughts about the game itself. All right, VCU was going to be prickly, pesky, and they were for most of that first half. Their point guard is Nick Harris. He goes out in the first 46 seconds, and that's a bad break. But you know what? That nothing to apologize for from Illinois' perspective. Just bad luck for VCU. And you did see that with a few lapses in aggression from Illinois, VCU was able to mount a comeback. They're trailing by 12. They take a 2-point lead. And if you were like me, you were probably thinking, oh no. But it was interesting how I didn't quite revert back to, oh no, here we go again. Not yet. I think if that were more prolonged of a run from VCU, if they would have sustained or maintained a lead or hung around that tie mark for a while, I would have gotten more concerned. I think there were a few things at work against Illinois in that, let's say, 5 or 6 minute stretch. And I don't like to call out officiating, but I thought it was pretty abysmal in the first half. And it did seem to affect Illinois negatively. Big Z, for example, got called for an over the back on a rebound. What's he going to do? He's 7'2". I didn't see an over the back there. There was the moving screen against Mirkovic that seemed pretty weak. There were just calls that seemed to disrupt Illinois' aggression, and that's on them for allowing it to do so. But it's also the inverse of that, is that they eventually got over it. They took the big haymaker from VCU in the first half. Big of a haymaker as VCU could have landed in that game. And then they counterpunched. And I thought that despite the weird, let's say, 10 to 5 minute mark of that first half, Andrej Stojakovic really got Illinois comfortable again. Just a fantastic first half for when you needed it, when you really needed it, because Keaton was bad in the first half. Mirkovic, not so good himself. You needed an alpha offensively, and that is what Andrej Stojakovic provided. It was a matchup tailor-made for him. Love to see the aggression. He really seems to be coming into his own. 9 points, was it, against Penn, and then 21 last night. You don't need 21 against Houston from Andre, but I do think that you feel more comfortable with him getting into double digits and being that third scoring option. So really encouraging from him all weekend. And he just seemed to steady the ship. There was another thing in the first half that made me feel pretty good, and that was a sideline report from Tracy Wolfson. And Brad Underwood was really going into the team to maintain their aggression, or assertiveness, I think was the word that she used. I have been on record many times in the last month and a half, and really the last few years, when things have kind of fallen apart for this team, or when they look really disjointed. I know the easy pivot is Coach Underwood, and I'm as guilty as anybody of that. But I also try to couple that with praise when it's warranted, and it is certainly warranted this weekend. They came into that game, VCU, with a clear plan to attack the basket over and over and over again. Illinois was relentless. He had to remind them down the stretch in the first half, get back to that. And they did so. And I just thought that the coaching staff didn't overthink. They knew what the advantages were going to be. It's all about matchups, right? Well, in this particular matchup, it was, you've got the size. You can get to the rim well, and they did so. Hearing that from Tracy Wolfson, and this is a bit unfair too, right? Because we don't hear what's going on in the huddle. But hearing that at the tail end of the first half kind of heartened me a little bit and made me think, okay. Like, he's telling them to do the right thing here. They just got sidetracked, I think, by some pretty piss-poor officiating, but also VCU being pesky. They are. I mean, they were disruptive, and they really, I thought, got into Keaton's head. And that sort of trickled down when Keaton, the unflappable freshman guard, looked human, So did the rest of the offense. But again, Andrej Stojakovic kind of bailed you out. Fantastic performance from him. There's another individual I got to single out, though. Tommy looked like Tommy. And that is a great thing to see. Now, there were a couple threes that didn't look so good, but there were a couple that did look good. There was the playmaking around the rim. I mean, that size is going to be tough to defend. And Houston is a little bit bigger, but Houston's not huge. So to see Tommy be more and more comfortable around the rim and really just to look confident, he looks so much like last year's Tommy. He was, 2 for 5 from 3. Okay, 5 attempts from there. That's fine. 6 for 10 from the field. So that means 4 for 5. Is that right? Yeah, 4 for 5 from 2-point range and 11 boards. And it was not just the height advantage, but there were times where he was getting after it, going all over in the half court to corral a rebound that I thought that's effort. And that is something that I have questioned because the eye test was suggesting that Tommy wasn't all there. He wasn't all engaged, and he was last night. He looked pretty good against Penn as well. That's a good weekend, and I know that it's a major step up. We all know this, right? That's a given, so I'm not going to say it too much, but you aren't playing Penn and VCU next weekend. I do think certain things travel, though. I think effort travels. I think the sort of confidence travels. To get him right again is maybe the single most important individual get-right task that they had to pull off this weekend. You get Tommy back to being Tommy. You are fully yourselves again. And that is in a game in which Keaton and David were not great. It goes to show you that when I looked at the box score to remind myself this morning who got what, and man, you did all that without your two best players being all that good. And that bodes well because I don't think that Keaton has 2 straight stinkers lined up in him. And I don't think Murkovic does either. And if you get the other supporting cast around them just feeling comfortable in their roles and regaining that confidence, then yeah, you do have more options on the floor at any given time than Houston will. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Houston, but I just think it bodes well to feel like, okay, this idea that Illinois is almost unguardable at points, that started to feel like it was the case again this weekend, and it hadn't for a while. So Tommy was massive yesterday. I think Andre being what he was when you needed him the most, great, but Tommy getting back to himself is the best news, individual news, to take away from this weekend. Singling out another part of yesterday's performance is the defense. Half-court defense. VCU is somewhere around 50th in the nation offensively. And to give you kind of a, measuring stick, to give you a comp, Texas A&M about the same thing. And I bring them up because that's who Houston beat by, 25 yesterday. Houston looked great. You looked great. You basically played very similar teams in terms of the metrics. I want to say A&M's around 38 on Ken Pom and VCU's around 42. And offensively, they're very similar. So I think to see that kind of focus and effort, and I keep going back to the word effort. I thought Illinois played their ass off last night. And even when things got a little bit hairy in the first half, I thought, I'm not upset with the way we're playing. We just got to get back to it, right? And in terms of an execution standpoint, but not in terms of effort. So that defensive intensity that we saw, it's a lot tougher when it's Kingston Flemings out there. But I do think it will make for a really good Sweet 16 game, not all dissimilar from the Iowa State game 2 years ago. I mean, just strap in. It's probably going to be that kind of breathless back and forth game. And Illinois' defense will be the thing that can keep them in it. Now that they're 2 games in, the reason why I am feeling much better about this team is they seem to have gotten shackled in the last month and a half of that Big Ten run with a tightness in late game situations. Maybe it's the overfamiliarity with your opponents. Maybe it was just the grind of a long conference season, but they needed, in the worst way, a reset button. And it felt like, man, all you need is one weekend to just sort of knock the dust off. and then really go shoot your shot in Houston. And that's exactly how this kind of came about. It worked out pretty much perfectly for this team to go see what happens and to feel as if maybe they're getting back to their best selves again. And that right there is why the defensive intensity yesterday, to me, bodes so well, because that's what they were doing in January. That is what happened when this team went from 40-something in KenPom defense to the low 20s. We saw it, and we thought, wow, something clicked. And then February wore on, and certain matchups were kind of smoking you with really good guards. Well, Houston has good guards, really good guards. It's going to take a yeoman's effort, but I think that this team, effort-wise, has it in them. Will it be enough? That's the question. If they go into this Houston game, and I see the same sort of intensity and focus, and they happen to lose, it will be disappointment, not anger. If they lay an egg, there'll be some anger there because Vegas says, no, this is a 2.5-point spread. KenPom has Houston winning by 1. If I recall, 2 years ago, Iowa State and Illinois, that was about the same case. I think Vegas had Iowa State as like a 2.5-point favorite. KenPom had Iowa State a couple notches above Illinois, had them like a point favorite. It's, as Jeremy pointed out, almost eerie, the similarities between that run and this run. The good news is you don't have UConn awaiting you after that. You don't have a generational team. As good as Florida is, you don't. So it's tough, but look at the rest of the tournament. There are very few teams that are going to have an easy path next weekend. It is going to be a barn burner of a Sweet 16 and Elite 8 because you're going pretty chalk in the first 2 rounds. And I know that can be boring, and I got a little bit bored yesterday with just the 15, 20-point wins. But you know what it leads to is a fantastic finish. So we're basically sacrificing Cinderella stories for much better late-round matchups. And it can be argued that Illinois-Houston will be the very best of the bunch on Thursday or Friday. Have your coffee ready, whatever you need to do. It's going to be a late start. You got the Chicago market, you got the Houston market. This thing will not tip off until about 8:45 or 9 o'clock. That's what it is. But I'll be in the garage. I'm not going to pod, I don't think. It's the live pods have been fun, but it's not as good of podcasting, I don't think. And you have your own thing and your own setup to worry about, to not listen to me yapping while Illinois is playing a huge game. So I'll be in the garage with friends late into the evening. I will be tired as all get out on Friday at school, but that's what coffee's for. And this is a big one. And like, you set yourself up for a major opportunity. It is hard not every now and then to just think, man, what if you just won 2 games and you got to the Final Four? And I say that like it's easy. On the other hand, it's just a game. And when I say that, it's for 40 minutes of regulation. You tip the ball in the air and you just see when the dust settles who was better on that given night. When this team's at their best, they can beat anybody. It is true. And we got glimpses of that this year. And then the struggle down the stretch. And the question, I think, will be, were those struggles indicative of what's about to happen against Houston? Or was that stretch something this team, in a way, almost needed in order to finally hit the reset button? Here's what I mean by that. There's often talk, and for good reason, if teams peak too early or not. I mean, Michigan, we were wondering, maybe they'd peak too early, and then this weekend doesn't appear to be the case. I think they even, to some extent, needed a reset button after kind of laboring through the Big Ten tournament. For this Illinois team, they, peaks and valleys, swelling, and then, kind of diminishing and all that. Things swelled in a very exciting way 2 months ago. And we were on record here, and not just me, but I know a lot of you listening, viewers, people that watch all the games. How could you not be excited and think that this team was an actual contender the way that they were playing? Maybe this stretch, and this is optimistic Carp talking, maybe this stretch was inevitable in a way, and the timing worked out perfectly. you would peaked to the point of being considered even maybe like an outside chance of a 1 seed. You fell back down to that 3 seed, and I talked over and over here, Operation 3 seed, Operation 3 seed. Give yourselves the best chance to advance into the Sweet 16. Mission accomplished. We know what the team's peak is, and we also know what the valley is. If you can stem off those worst tendencies, the ones where you lose a little bit of focus with a lead, or the ones where your defensive intensity is lacking, then you are a formidable opponent. Houston is tough. They're probably tougher than you. Are they more talented? I don't know. I think that's up for debate. So with that being said, if you can somehow raise that toughness, I know I'm throwing out a buzzword here, but it is observable. I mean, we saw that against VCU. That was a tough Illinois team. If you're able to rise that level of toughness to, if not quite match Houston, get close to it, I think the talent might sway ever so slightly in your favor. And one thing I think bears repeating, this team is better away from home. We see it with our own eyes. Even the Michigan State game, which you lost in overtime, that was a better performance overall than, let's say, the Wisconsin overtime loss at home or Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament. Or UCLA on the road. I know that was an exception, but oddly enough, that was not that tough of an environment. It's like the Breslin Center, Carver Hawkeye, Mackey Arena. Tough environments. Even some of the more heated environments, like, Tennessee, playing them in Nashville. That seems to raise something in this team. I think Brad Underwood's teams, on the whole, have been surprisingly good on the road. They do not shrink all that often in tough environments. So this actually works out. What would the alternative have been? It would have been the St. Louis, Chicago, Indy. Well, listen, if you're the 1 seed and you had stolen that from Michigan somehow, some way, then that's great. And we'd be talking about a very different kind of path to the Final Four. But as it stands, given all your other options, this seemed to be the best. I kind of wanted to go out west and play Arizona out west. And we'll see what they do today. But, I mean, they look really good. No, I think this might have worked out. And what a weird thing that would be is if this team were to win 2 games in Houston, we actually go back to some of these disappointments and say, man, good thing we lost some of those games and we fell back to this spot. Now, I know that was not the team's intent, and that doesn't make those losses in the moment any less frustrating. And also, it doesn't, I think, make our vibes or feelings going into the tournament any less valid. They were struggling. They were not themselves. It was a rough month and a half. And what made it so rough was we knew what they were capable of, and then they weren't doing it. And credit to them. And this is where I got to give credit to Brad Underwood. It can drive me nuts how on the level he is, which is kind of a weird thing to say for a guy who used to bark all the time on the sidelines. But he's sort of found this new Zen-like thing, which on one hand, I like that better from a coach than screaming and yelling all the time. But on the other hand, when things aren't going well, you want to see this sense of urgency. Well, Brad's not going to give that off all that much anymore. That is not his current style, is to look like a coach that really is urgent and wants to get after it. Staying the course through all of this was maddening at the time, and yet somehow was just what you needed this last weekend. And we'll see if that travels to Houston, this sort of, even keel Brad Underwood. But maybe it worked. Was it part of the grand plan? I don't know about that. Again, this is the tricky thing that we're trying to balance is we're celebrating as we should what is awesome, getting the Sweet 16. We should celebrate Brad Underwood for that. His legacy as a very successful coach at Illinois, that is established because you can go back in the media guides. And I look at Lou Henson. The year before they made the Final Four in '89, they lost in the second round. Now, I don't know what that game was. I was a year and a half old. But you look at all the disappointments in March of Lou Henson and how much we laud him. It took a Final Four. And I've said here before, and I will say it again, he makes a Final Four, I will find some piece of a hat to eat. I will do that on air. I don't know what hat and if it's going to be the Bill or the Brim or what. liquefy it like the Dahmer party did with their shoes back in the day. I got to figure it out. I need to find an edible hat in some way, shape, or form. And I will be the first over there to help build the statue. And I will, if you want to call that eating crow or any of that, go for it. That's fine. I calls them as I sees them. I wear my emotions on my sleeve for better and for worse. I own all of that. You set yourself up. It's going to be weird waking up Thursday thinking, oh, God, I think we're going to win. Damn it. I mean, I'm just sitting here right now thinking I'm not scared of Houston. Why? Because I've watched them and they are really good. They are relentless. Kelvin Sampson, say what you want about him. I'm over the Eric Gordon thing, but there are bigger scumbags in the world than Kelvin Sampson. But the dude knows how to coach. But why am I going to wake up Thursday? I know I am. I'm not going to wake up with a pit in my stomach thinking, oh, boy. Well, it ends tonight. I don't think so. And it's a feeling similar to February 1st. I woke up that Sunday, and what we've been doing, my band, we're a three-piece. So other two guys come in here on Sunday afternoons, and we've been working on our album, which is basically done. And I woke up that morning saying, yeah, we're going to beat Nebraska. Feels right. Yeah. I did not say that before the Purdue game, just for clarification. I did not expect Illinois to win that game, let alone for Keaton to go for 46. But the Nebraska game, I woke up thinking, yep, revenge, we're going to get it. And they did. I got a gut feeling already about Thursday. I do. I don't know if I would have had that waking up Saturday if Illinois were to advance. But I also don't think I'd wake up thinking, oh, God, UConn, it's going to take a 1 in 100 effort. Because we all, in our heart of hearts, knew that. But I'm going to wake up Thursday thinking, oh, boy, they're going to win. And I think they will be a pick of many. And I would not fault anyone for doing that. Now, this all being said with, okay, well, we know what Brad Underwood's teams have done against better competition down the stretch. We've talked about it. We've acknowledged it. We have poured over it, and it wore me to a nub, these losses against good teams. Will this team be able to conjure up what got them road wins at Purdue and Nebraska? What got them the win against Texas Tech back in November with JT Toppin? Can they do that? And the first two games, greasing the wheels and getting back to it, I think maybe so. Oh, ride the roller coaster, Carp. Ride that roller coaster. From Illini Brick Roll. Good morning to be an Illini. Absolutely, Brick Roll. From Stephen Colbert. Morning, everyone. This night shifter is still giddy from the game. You and me both. More from Brick Girl. The utter dominance of our wins was borderline astounding based on our performance over the last month. Brick Girl, you mentioned that. And that's why there was that seed of doubt when VCU tied it, took the 2-point lead, thinking, oh, man. You know, those habits creeping back in. But that's not what happened. And that is a credit to the team. That is a credit to the players for not allowing it to happen, for staying the course. I got to give props to Jeremy, Illini Inquirer, because he said this after the win against Penn. If VCU makes a run, don't start chucking threes. Like, keep going to the rim. And Jeremy was hitting on that point. And Illinois chucked, maybe there were one or two chucks, I think, in the first half. One, maybe two. Remarkable maturity being shown from that team. Patience being shown to continue to execute the game plan, relentlessly go to the rim, knowing it would all work out if they continue to do so. That, to me, Brick Girl, is astounding, given what I thought was some very frustrating offense in the last 5 or 6 weeks, where the efficiency numbers dipped only a little bit, but you could see it and feel it, that they were sort of forcing things or just saying, hell, I'll shoot the 25-footer. Not the case in the last 2 games. So that is a major credit to them. All right. From also from Stephen Colbert, we seem to either dominate or look great or lose in heartbreaking fashion. Well, this will be it, Stephen Colbert, is if Illinois were to lose in heartbreaking fashion against Houston, that will be disappointing. But as I mentioned before, I don't think it would be anger from me as much as bummer, disappointment, sadness. for lack of a better term, because this team is capable of making a Final Four. We know how good. Oh my God. Can you imagine? I remember how good it felt making the Final Four, and I just had this thought, like, what if they do it again? One thing I forgot to mention, the best part of advancing out of a weekend in the tournament, and I said this 2 years ago, and it bears repeating, is you get the whole week to just soak in it. The whole week to just soak in. Yeah, we got a game. And only 15 other programs will be able to say that. Love advancing. It's so nice. It is such a release, and it makes the next 5 or 6 days bliss. So, yeah. From D.A. Feld. Everyone is healthy. Defense is finally peaking at exactly the right time. This is all you can ask for. Let's go. That's it. Healthy. Defense looks to be back. Is it Duffeld or D.A. Feld? But either one. From Jacob. We have our mojo back, and I like that Houston has to game plan for us. I noticed this, Jacob, when looking at the KenPom numbers. They are very slow and methodical. I think first one to 75 wins this game. Honestly, first one to 70, which might sound weird for two teams that are pretty damn good offensively. I don't see this being I see this also being a pretty quick game. And what I mean by that is, in the same way that a college football game goes quick when you got two teams that just love running the ball, I think this goes pretty similar. I don't see a lot of fouls. I see, first one to 70 wins. I think that sounds right. Check the over-under, and I know the inclination will be that, oh, well, these two teams, they are really offensively efficient. They are, but they are slow. I think Houston's slower than you. So this is not really all that different contrasting styles of offense. The interesting thing, and Isaac Trotter, it's so cool to see him because he used to be at 93.5. He's a great dude. And he is now the national writer for 24/7 Sports for college basketball. He's really good at it. And he was a talent back in the day, and he's just getting better and better. And he watches all this stuff far more than I ever will. He's probably watched more college basketball in the last year than I have in my life. And he talked about Houston. And he said, I kind of like the matchup. He's like, I buy that Illinois would be in a pretty good spot because Houston takes a lot of bad shots. Now, what is a bad shot, right? Well, it can be one of two things, I think. It can be forcing something quick in the shot clock or not making that extra pass. And we saw that maybe with Illinois a little bit too much last month, which seemed against their better judgment. The other one is the mid-range 2-point jump shot. And watching that Texas A&M game, they went in for Houston. They did. And it could go in against Illinois. I mean, we see Michigan State. They continue to do it to some success. I understand and I kind of appreciate how that's not part of Illinois' offense. We say, why so many threes? Well, either you're shooting around the rim or you're shooting a three. That's what Illinois does. The shot chart, I think, is a thing of beauty because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to shoot a bunch of mid-range 2-point jumpers. Houston does not shy away from that. And that can either be to their benefit or their detriment, depending on the rims, depending on the night, depending on if Illinois' size can be just a little bit disruptive on those. So I want to, and I kind of do, buy into Isaac Trotter's idea that Houston is maybe ripe for the picking because they are not always the smartest with shot selection. Now, you got to make your own, and they're going to be hounding you. So the Houston defense, that is the great equalizer in all this, and that is what is concerning because Keaton looked shook last night in the first half against VCU and made some uncharacteristic blunders. Hopefully that's out of system, but that is the thing to look out for. And yet, I'm still optimistic. From Jacob, 9th Sweet 16 in my lifetime, but I probably shouldn't count 84 and 85 since I was 1 and 2 years old. Happy to be in the Sweet 16, but let's go get a Final Four. Why not? Also from Brick Girl, I let my daughter stay up to watch the men, and she wanted to watch the women too. Thank you, Brick Girl. I had a note of this. The women get the win in Nashville last night. They beat Colorado, closed that game out very effectively, and now they get Vandy at Vandy, I believe, which is just how the women's tournament works. You go to the host team for the first 2 rounds. And, it's tough, but Illinois did hang at Iowa, and Iowa is also a 2 seed. So that's basically the equivalent here. And wouldn't that be cool? I know the women's tournament is very chalk, very, very, very chalk, more so than the men's. It is incredibly difficult and very rare for these lower seeds to beat one of those top home teams. But let's see. I think that'd be pretty awesome. And maybe, Shauna Green, I think a good next step for that program is, and why not, is next year getting like the 4 seed and getting to host a couple games. Also from Jacob, my youngest daughter calls every team we played the booty butts. She told everyone last night that we beat them. I like her mode of thinking, Jacob, the booty butts. Hey, she calls them as she sees them. I appreciate that. From Jalen Gallows. Hey, Jalen Gallows. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. The emotional release, knowing that any loss going forward will not be disappointing, is massive. Maybe, unless we make the national championship. There is catharsis, and there is, Jalen Gallows, to your point, a sense of release. Like, that's why when my wife came out last night, like, Bob was safe to come out. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're good. I kind of laughed. And I kind of have that giddiness right now because, and I've not done a great job of that this year, of just internalizing losses like a child. Immature of me for sure, and overly emotive of me for sure, but it had piled up, and just advancing releases so much tension. A lot of those last night. It's kind of funny because in my garage I got a dartboard, and I'm not good at darts, but it's out there, and every time out I'm throwing darts, just passing the time. I kind of had to watch last night in solitude. It worked out with my friends having other things to do, and they'll be back for the Sweet 16 as we all kind of take a breath, and now we settle in for what's going to be a big-time game. But, yeah, there is something to be said about that, Jalen Gallows, that you just that release, that catharsis of advancing. This is from Stephen Colbert. I grew up with the last years of Weber and then Gross. Brad has his flaws, but I'll never not appreciate his rebuilding the program. 100%, Stephen. I have been obviously critical, but I've also said, and this is the weird, holding two truths in one hand. Man, sometimes his coaching drives me batty. And then on the other hand, hey, when all said and done, we're going to look back fondly on the Underwood era. And both of those things are true for me. In the moment, the frustrations, they happen. I talk about them because that's what I got to do for myself, I guess. I mean, that's the selfish nature of podcasting for sure. But I do think that, yeah, it goes without saying, he is someone who has had a lot of success here. And his legacy as a successful Illini coach, that is secure. And there will be, and probably could be right now, even debates about, well, where would you rank him all-time Illini coaches? Well, he's going to be in the top 3. He's done more than Lon Kruger. And I love Lon Kruger. He accomplished more than him. Bill Self's a Hall of Famer, and Lou Henson is the lifer, but he's in that tier. And Weber did have that amazing success early, so I guess you'd have him up there, but you know what came next, right? So that's a complicated legacy for Bruce, despite the most successful season in Illinois history. But yeah, Brad it is worth celebrating and acknowledging what he did. Now, does that mean necessarily that I've talked about this idea of, fatigue, of shelf life, and I've seen it with other teams that I've rooted for. And when things aren't going good, I can feel that overfamiliarity kind of be burdensome. Again, that's on me. That is not a universal truth for Illini fans, but I know there's been frustration because I saw even on the Inquirer pod this morning, some people in the chat thread saying, well, they beat 2 bad teams. It doesn't really matter. And yeah, they beat 2 not so great teams, but they smoked them and they made the Sweet 16. So I'm not going to be mincing words or trying to parse through things to find the negative stuff. They made the freaking Sweet 16. Hooray. I'm wearing Illini crap all week. This is worth celebrating. So it is okay to be critical if you feel, the time calls for it. But I also, and I've always tried to do this in my podcast, is be critical when warranted, but also celebrate. And that's what this is. And there's been a lot to celebrate with both revenue sports programs over the last 5 years. And Brad has made Illinois a consistent top 15 program. He has. That's the fact. From Jacob, VCU, good prep for Houston. Probably agree with that. Let's see here. From Jalen Galos as well. Tommy had a touch on the back foul. That was ridiculous. That was a bad one, too. Yep. And from Jalen Galos, I'd take 21 against Houston. Are you referring to, and this is way back, Jalen Galos, but was Andrej Stojakovic? Yes. I take another 21 from him, and he looks really confident. He looks really good up there. There's St. Dom. Well, we made it to a Sweet 16. That feels good. It does, St. Dom. Keaton played like a true freshman, says St. Dom. He did, and I thought that even though he got 14, or was it 13 in the second half, he was uncharacteristically bad at points in the first half. Take a breath, kid. Regroup. I have faith that he will. You don't need at Purdue Keaton Wagler the way other guys are playing. I think you just need him to steady the ship. Take a breath. It'll be interesting to see who they match up on him defensively. But, yeah, love Keaton. From Jake, one of my favorite parts of the game was Martelli's tech, and then him whining, saying, we belong here too. Okay, buddy. Yeah, the tech was clearly calculated because that was as clean of a block. And I haven't even talked about Z's block and dunk. It's the freaking picture on the episode image on YouTube. Holy shit. I mean, here's the thing. I had been texting with Trevor and Isaac just enough to miss that he had actually gotten the block. I thought it was a missed dunk. No. It was a block. And then his dunk. I mean, I'm trying to think of a better dunk. I know Terrence had the two-hand slam that was so important in the Iowa State game. So that has its own kind of tier for Illini dunks. There was the Luther head layup because he was a bit gimpy at the end of that Arizona game to help you extend the lead in overtime. I mean, best single dunk highlight reel moment, that's Big Z. I mean, that is insane. 6 dunks for Illinois last night. And I saw someone, I want to say on the Inquirer chat, I can't attribute exactly who, say, man, in the gross years, if we had 6 dunks in a season, that was impressive. And then someone referenced how John Eakey probably missed 6 dunks every game that year, it felt like. And yeah, it is a far cry from the gross years. You got dudes. Underwood will never have a problem getting dudes here. Maybe I should just sit back and appreciate that more. I mean, look at the dudes on this team. All right, this is from Matt. Thought Tommy moved his feet really well when defending on ball. He looked like a different person, Matt. I mean, it was super impressive. All right. Also from Jake. Tommy's second and third efforts on the glass, very encouraging. That was phenomenal. And it was all over the baseline, Jake. I mean, it wasn't just around the rim. He was getting rebounds 15 feet away from the basket, tipping him up, fighting for it. I mean, that was just awesome. Also from St. Dom, Keaton and David are inconsistent, but they are freshmen. They are. I mean, I kind of like you got the rough game from both of them, I think, out of the way. Not to say that's a guarantee against Houston, but these guys have had remarkable bounce back abilities. So I think that bodes well for Thursday. From Illini Brick Girl, inconsistent is different than playing poorly. Others pick them up and they still show effort, which is great to see. Good point, Brick Girl. And I think that, despite the messiness from their games, the effort was there. The defensive intensity was there. So, yeah, I'm encouraged by all that. St. Dom mixing it up in the chat thread. This is from Cookie. It's been fun watching Illinois the last 2 games, but outside of Illinois, I feel like the tournament has been a downer due to lack of upsets. For sure, Cookie, but here is the good news. It will make for a much better weekend next weekend because you got top 4 seeds all over the place. Maybe UCLA springs an upset against UConn today. I could see it. Maybe Miami over Purdue. I don't see that so much, but it's okay for the betterment of the tournament going forward. I am willing to sacrifice Cinderella upsets for big matchups down the stretch. I mean, take last night. The Nebraska-Vandy game, all-timer. That was special. The environment, the intensity of both of those teams. I haven't been that emotionally invested in a game where my team wasn't playing in a long time. What a way to, if Illinois was the main course for us last night, what a dessert that was. Unbelievable. And if that shot went in, the best buzzer beater in NCAA tournament history if that goes in. It was in. It was in until it wasn't. Insane. What a game. But that's what you get when you have better teams playing each other, and the intensity steps up, and it's just basketball porn. I mean, that's what it is. So we get that Thursday night. We get that. And pretty cool. All right, let's see here. Little conversation about Brad Underwood, which you've had many times. And listen, my criticisms of in-game stuff, I don't think are unwarranted at times, but he had a good weekend and he had a good offseason to build this team to lead to this good weekend. So it's, trying to see the forest for the trees sometimes. This is a macro podcast that when I get in the micro of, oh, damn it, why didn't you call a timeout here? How do you let these runs happen from other teams? It can be frustrating. And I think it's worth calling out. And there's just not that to call out from this weekend. Like, they advanced, they dominated, and it looked pretty good. It's just on and on it goes in the chat thread. As Jalen Gallo says, Carp's feelings may change. They do all the time. No, I mean, here's the thing. My misgivings with Brad are there, but I've always said, dude, nice, and celebrate it. I understand why that would come off as, either contradictory, hypocritical, whichever, right? I think that's sports fandom. You find me a fan of a professional team or a collegiate team that doesn't both love and hate their coach even when they're cooking. Find me a Kansas City Chiefs fan right now that isn't a little fed up with Andy Reid. And this guy's won, 3 titles with him? So that is sports fandom. It is the silliness of it. Admittedly, I own every word I say. Every word. Let's see here. From Czar, I don't know. Were Trotter and Lutula both saying Illinois matched up well with Michigan? Yeah, I mean, to that point, Czar, I don't know if they were about Michigan. And to me, that always seemed like a really bad matchup. And that's why I didn't want them again in the Big Ten tournament. Or let me rephrase. I wanted to beat Wisconsin, and then I kind of figured you're going to lose again to Michigan. You just are. And if Illinois makes the deepest of runs, it would be crushing to face them again because I don't want to lose to them in the Final Four again. I mean, I'll take the Final Four, trust me, but that would suck. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there because they look freaking good. I thought SLU had a puncher's chance. Nope, they did not. All right, we've got Bill Self references. That's a big old combo here. Let's see. Seth. Oh, my God. Seth says Brad's going to take Samson behind the Pizza Hut parking lot. Well, Seth, you know my thoughts on Brad and the Pizza Hut parking lot. I will give this team credit, though. They did show toughness this weekend. You're going to have to against Houston. You have to. If not, match it, get close. And I thought that for all the, Brad's bloviating about toughness, they actually had that this weekend. So credit to them and credit to him to, dredging that out of them. From Mitch, what will be the keys to the game to beat Houston on Thursday? Mitch, simplistic as it sounds, I think if you just play that good half-court defense, I think you're going to have a shot if your defense, half-court defense, is as good as it was against VCU. To me, that is so much of a mindset thing. Obviously, the talent that you're playing improves. It's much better than VCU, but your defensive intensity should be able to keep them around 70, right? I don't know how much Houston gets out and runs. That is something that those that watch more ball than I would have to address. How many transition buckets they get. Illinois seem to run into issues this year when they have guards just go downhill. Well, guess what? Houston has those. If you can limit maybe those transition points, which we saw VCU try to get into last night, I think the half-court defense can be good enough. Offensively, just patience, and just not getting worked up into a lather. I felt like Illinois got their blood pressure going a little bit in the first half against VCU. You felt them rush. You felt them get antsy. You got to stay cool against Houston. And that's easier said than done. From A. Whipple, Big Z's dunk getting all the views, but Andre's out of that timeout was more impactful. And it was happening during the announcer talking about going to the bucket more was great. Yeah, that was when Tracy had talked to Underwood And yeah, it was huge. And it was a big momentum changer, Whipple. You're absolutely right. From Brick Girl, Brad said in postgame he wanted to call timeout, but his assistant said wait it out. I wonder how many times that's happened. Sometimes, Brick Girl, I hope they weren't advising against him in the UCLA game when that happened, or when it didn't happen. Sometimes I think you should override that. I don't know. I didn't have a distinct call a damn timeout moment yesterday. I didn't. I've had a few of those this year. I would be lying if I said I had one last night. Let's see. From Artur Zachowski, I don't think we can close the game like Nebraska did last night. Well, we'll find out. That was so impressive how Nebraska closed it out. Good for them. And as Arturo says, avoid OT. Maybe, but as my good friend Harry Black never said, we're due. We're due for an OT win. Wouldn't that just be poetry? Yes, Czar. Need to be like Fonzie. Good Pulp Fiction reference. Cool like Fonzie. Cool like Fonzie. From Jalen Galos, appreciate your coverage this season, Carp, though I haven't made many live shows. I'm always listening to the pod. Appreciate it, Jalen. Yeah, not doing the live ones anymore, just for my own sanity and for the betterment of the content. I don't think they are as evergreen. I don't think they're as fun to listen to. So, yeah, we will be back. Here's the thing. I teach Friday. So, fair warning, if they win, it would be Friday afternoon. I think we'd still want to talk about it Friday afternoon. So we would schedule it. We'd say Friday afternoon, here's the pod. If they lose, we'll get back to it when we get back to it because, we'd be licking our wounds and there'd be some hurt in the season ending. But that's what happens when you play big games. And Brad Underwood has gotten this team back into a position to play a big game. Credit to him. Credit to the team. They dominated this weekend. And that's worth celebrating. It really is. And, of course, we want more. We should want more. They want more. If their expectations are more, so should ours. But for now, enjoy a day of basketball. Enjoy watching this team in 5 days from now. Enjoy just sitting in it, wearing your Illini gear all week. This is the good stuff, right? This is why winning in the tournament feels so good. And knowing that you are in a select few group of fans that get to have that anticipation for the next week. The Big Ten is going to be well represented. We already have 4 teams in there. I think Purdue will punch their ticket today. Watch out for UCLA. Am I forgetting of anybody else? And I think 11-2 is the record for the Big Ten. Wisconsin and who else is out? Oh, Ohio State on the first day. The first 2 games. And I had a friend in our group thread saying, man, I hope this doesn't bode poorly for the Big Ten. Not at all. They have been showing up and kicking some ass. I mean, most of these games aren't close. So I appreciate all you tuning in on this Sunday morning. Illinois is in the Sweet 16. That feels so damn good. Yes, it does. Never will get old. Iowa, thank you. Does Iowa have a shot against Florida, Arturo? I don't think so. That would be genius level coaching from Ben McCollum. That little bugger, boy, is he annoying, but I want my Iowa coaches annoying. So I'm glad he's there. He will make them just relevant enough to hate, but not good enough to be an actual threat. And that's how I like my Illinois or Iowa basketball. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your weekend and the rest of your week. Looks to be warm again Thursday, maybe some storms when the game kicks off. But I will be in the garage with my brethren watching the game and well into the evening. It's going to be a late one, I am sure. Before I get out of here, I got to thank our sponsors, Hamilton Walkers, Downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits. Treat yourself to celebratory steak. Sweet 16s are worth celebrating, and there is no better restaurant in town to do so than at Hamilton Walkers. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, whatever your insurance needs, visit online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 and join their maintenance program. No overtime or weekend fees, guaranteed same-day service with Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com for your next home improvement project. Check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and soak it in. It's good stuff. It's another 75-degree day. Get to wear shorts, some Illini gear. Good shit. And we'll see you Friday. when. It will be after school. I hope it is to talk about an Elite Eight matchup after a huge win against Houston. Shoot your shot. Let's see what happens. Take care, everybody. It is the 200 level.